So I set you a few questions looking at the chain rule, the latest topic that we covered in the differentiation part of our course. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work you through the solutions to these questions so you can check your answer and just make sure we're all on the same page. So just a quick refresher for you, these were the three questions I wanted. So I wanted you to calculate the derivative of each of these. So first one was f of x equals sine of x cubed plus x. Second was f of x equals cos of 2x to the power 4 plus 1. And the third one was y equals the cube root of 6x cubed plus 3x. So here we go. So the first one, f of x equals sine of x cubed plus x. Now chain rule, remember that comes from finding d by dx of f of g of x, so a function within a function. And to do that, take the derivative f dashed of g of x, and then we times it by g dashed of x. Now the easy way to think about this is you take the derivative of the outer function, don't touch the inner one, and then multiply the whole thing by the derivative of the inner function. So if we were looking at this one here, the outer function part, the f of x part, would be the sine. The inner function, so the g of x, would be equal to the x cubed plus x. So when we're working it through, we have to bear that in mind. So our derivative, our f dashed of x in this case, we start by taking the derivative of sine, so that would be equal to cos, so it's cos of x cubed plus x. We then have to multiply that by the derivative of the inner function, the g dashed of x. So we have to then take the derivative of this part here. So looking at each term on its own, derivative of x cubed, bring the power down, reduce it by 1. We get 3x squared plus, well, derivative of x is 1. Once we've done that, it's now just a case of simplifying it as much as we can. Well, two different things that we can multiply together. Start by putting the g first, it just makes more sense in terms of the way we write things. So we get 3x squared plus 1 times cos of x cubed plus x. Now one thing I'm going to highlight here is don't fall into the trap of thinking this multiplies the bracket here. It doesn't. This is multiplying this whole functional part, because this whole part here is the f dashed of g of x. So this part here multiplies this entire thing. Think of this as being in a bracket on its own. Okay, so it multiplies that whole thing, which is why we write it like this. We don't write it as cos of x cubed plus x times the 3x squared plus 1, because that looks like we're multiplying these and then taking cosine. It's not like that, so don't fall into that trap when you're doing this. Second question was f of x equals cos of 2x to the power 4 plus 1. Again, we follow the same routine, identify the f, identify the g, and then follow our formula. Now the f, the outer function, that's our cosine. The g, the inner function, that's the part here within the brackets, the 2x to the 4 plus 1. So there's our two parts, we can take it from there. So f dashed of x, derivative of cos is minus sine, so it's minus sine 2x to the 4 plus 1. We then have to multiply the whole thing by the g dashed of x, so the derivative of this part here. 2x to the power of 4, derivative of that becomes 8x cubed, and then plus 1, the derivative of that is nothing, so we just leave that part off. So we can then simplify it and say, fine, so our derivative is negative 8x cubed sine of 2x to the power of 4 plus 1. There's our answer for this one. Again, same thing I'm going to highlight to you, don't fall in the trap of thinking it's the bracket and this multiplying together. This is multiplying this whole function together. Again, think of it in brackets if you want to. Watch that little trap. Final question was y equals the cube root of 6x cubed plus 3x. Now again, this one's slightly more tricky. You can't identify straight off what the f function is because you can't see a trig function there. So we have to work it through and take these parts into account. Now if we were to be doing this, say it was the cube root of just an x, we'd write this as a power to begin. We still do that first step here as well. So we'd write it as 6x cubed plus 3x all to the power of a third. Now we still have to look at this and figure out what our inner function and what our outer function is. Well, the inner function is in the brackets in this case. It's what's happening secondly. And our outer function is the 1/3. So in this case, our inner function is the g, and our outer function is this 1/3 part. So you could almost think of it as your g of x to the 1/3. So there's your inner function, the g of x, and it's all raised to a power of a third. So the first thing we do is take the derivative of the outer part, so imagine it to the 1/3, and then we times by the derivative of what's in the brackets here. So in this case, our derivative, our dy by dx equals, take the derivative of the bracket as if we were normally, so 1/3 6x cubed plus the x, we don't touch what's in the bracket, take 1 off of this, get minus 2/3, we then multiply that by the derivative of what's in the brackets here. So in this case, that's 18x squared plus 3. Now we're at a stage where we simplify. Now remember, negative in this here, we don't like that a lot, so let's change that. That becomes 1 over 3 bracket 6x cubed plus 3x to the 1/3 times by this. So times by the 18x squared plus 3. Now again, combine it, make it one fraction, and then simplify as much as you can. So on the top I've got 18x squared plus 3 over 3 times the cube root of the 6x cubed plus 3x. Now if you can simplify again at this stage, you can. If you look at the top, I could take a common factor of 3, so that would be 6x squared plus 1, and I can divide it by this 3 here. So I've got 3 bracket 6x plus 1 over 3 times the cube root of 6x cubed plus 3x, and I can cancel these 3's out here. So simplify it down just a little bit. So I've then got 6x plus 1 over the cube root of 6x cubed plus 3x. This kind of little trick here, if it says simplify fully, watch out for that. That could be something they throw in to just kind of catch you off guard. So just be aware of bits like that. But there you go, 6x plus 1 over the cube root of 6x cubed plus 3x. Hope those went well. Hope they weren't too taxing and too difficult. I'll see you in class and we can work through a bit more together.